All right, welcome guys. It's that time of the month again. And again, I have two Visionary Realms legends with me today. Creative Director Chris Joppa Perkins and Game Designer Tim Convo Wathen. Say g'day, guys.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
All right.
Is that right?
Yeah, you guys don't really need an introduction. They all know exactly who you are. So we've had you both on before, but today's a little bit different. So the topic for today is probably the biggest and broadest one we've had on the Dev Roundtables, the DRTs. We've got covering today Npc Ai, encounter design, population/placement philosophy, special systems like dispositions, and then any kind of related QA if we have time at the end. So we'll get through as many questions as we can. We have quite a few detailed ones, and I know some of these topics will cover quite a lot of info, so we'll try to keep it concise and answer as quickly as we can to get as much information out to you guys as possible. But if we don't get through them all, we may have to try to answer them on the forums or follow up in another time. No promises, maybe another part 2, who knows. But until then, we will get stuck right in. So I think we'll just start with, unless it's directed specifically to someone, I'll let you guys figure out who wants to go first. This first one, maybe we'll get Joppa to start. It's on encounter design. So it's been a long time since the Tower of the Reckless Magician stream. Does it still hold up for what is planned for group encounters or the general level of threat for the average mob that the team is shooting for? Gurkhas specifically, in brackets. If not, how has the vision evolved?
Cool. I don't think it was that long ago that I was mentioning that stream in particular, going back and watching it again, and how much I love it. I love that footage because it was really hard, and it was one of the first times in development that we had an area that was tuned to the point where we were really having to play our classes well. We were having to pay very close attention, and defeating the content was not a given. So on that level, yes, it is still representative, and continues to be representative of what you could say the one dimension of the level of challenge. But the other thing about that was it was very, very right word. Like it's, I'll just say one dimensional. The Gurkhas, for example, did a ton of damage very, very quickly. So that's one facet of difficulty. And where we are at now, and where we've always, kind of been on track to get, is a much more layered and multifaceted sense of challenge in Pantheon. So yes, it is still emblematic of the kind of intensity and the kind of risk, the kind of mob to player power ratio, except that now that reality, that experience is going to be shared among all of the other different combat-related systems that are in place and are coming online. So that's a very general way to say yes. And then, Masteries obviously playing into that, where we want to make sure that Masteries are something that you're growing into, and as you grow into them, you're going to feel yourself growing more powerful in relation to the content that you're dealing with. But it's also going to further kind of it's going to open up your ability to deal with more varied situations and more multifaceted forms of difficulty. So it's not just like, I need to build my masteries up so that I can have more health and do more damage and, just deal with these very binary forms of challenge. But I'm filling out my masteries. I'm becoming more and more proficient as a class. And now as challenge ramps up in non-binary ways, all these kind of multifaceted ways through dispositions and environmental effects and unforeseen circumstances and what have you, that I'm also able to deal with that more fully. So hopefully that's enough of a general answer to satisfy. That's a good question.
Absolutely. I remember too those Gurkhas. I was in a stream with you guys when we were with Carnage, and that was fun. Really fun. Those Gurkhas were brutal. All right, so moving on to the next. Do you have anything to add, Tim?
No, other than we'll probably end up retuning the tower.
Yeah, cool. All right, so moving on to AI and dispositions. So the next post has quite a few topics, so I might just cherry pick a few out so we can get through to other people. But AI and dispositions. Will NPCs ever alter their disposition mid-fight or feature more than one disposition? Will they do this in regards to external stimuli, scripted, or is there a hook for a player to be being able to change it? If so, what about for charmed NPCs? That's a pretty good question.
Yeah, it is. It's got a lot of layers to it. Foundationally, I think we want to start and not have the multiple dispositions. That's probably something we would look at post release, or just when we start feeling really good about what we have in. As far as scripted stimuli or hooks, I think one of the things I like about this question is it brings me right to our Avenging disposition, where that would only be triggered in combat. So there would be, scenario 2 NPCs. The group kills one of the NPCs. So the existing NPC would trigger his Avenging disposition because he killed his ally, and then obviously with that would come, some coolness. Not nothing we can go into right now, but that would be a good example of players triggering a disposition. And there is a chance that NPC may have already had a pre-existing condition or disposition, and switched over to Avenging because that happened. As for the charmed NPCs, no, I think if a player charms an NPC right now, we'll probably just wipe it, and you wouldn't expect to have the disposition on the charm pet.
That's awesome, man. Good stuff. Great info. Beans. All right, so did you have anything to add to that, Chris?
No. Convo and I kind of convened before this, and we've gone through and kind of loosely figured out who was going to take the lead on which question. So if one of us doesn't respond, awesome. It just means that we don't have any.
Awesome. That's perfect. Okay, so I'll leave it up to you guys to pick and choose. So let's move on to zone population and placement. What is your general philosophy on designing zone base pop in terms of creating XP areas? So what sort of process can we expect to see to ensure zones are usable and worthwhile?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I feel like it dovetails into part 2 pretty well. And so I'll just read a little bit of that one too. How will you go through each experience area to ensure camps don't feel too small, mob density isn't too... These are all very related, and I'm going to speak to one part of the philosophy of that, and I'll let Convo chime in if he wants to add anything. But one of the things that you're going to hear me reference this a lot in this roundtable, which is back when Project 1999 Green server launched, I decided to kind of take the little bit of free time that I have and devote it to just really kind of diving as deep as I could into that experience again, because played it back in the day for a long time, have lots of memories, lots of nostalgia, but it's not the same as like re-experiencing it again. And one of the things that I really took away from that experience it was this concept of, I guess, the best way I know to describe it, I just call it player push, where back in those EQ days, there were often times when I would move to different parts of the game that I wouldn't have normally gone to if I had just been able to go to the intended camp spot that I had, and there was room to go there and set up a camp. I would never have gone to Mistmore. I would never have gone, to Kedge or Befallen or these places, because they weren't part of that just kind of like predetermined best path. So often there's this idea of this player push where I just don't have room. I want to go and set up a spot here, but I can't because there's too many players and I have to move along. So that's a big part of the philosophy. Is we want to design EXP areas, if you will, places to go and set up a camp and kill NPCs for experience, for coin, for whatever it is you desire to do there, that are sufficient to support different amounts of groups, which that's part of our encounter design and our zone design process, is deciding how many groups. You'll probably hear Convo talk about that a little bit later with one of the later questions with Black Rose Keep. We think about how many groups do we want to support concurrently in this one area, and part of that is thinking holistically about the whole game world. What's kind of the target population of a server, starting there, and so then what's an equal breakdown of players among continents and then among zones to kind of support that amount, and then how many concurrent groups do you see existing in the individual zones and in the areas within the zones. And so there's that side of it, but then there's also if everything's always available, if these places are big enough and there's all the room and ability you want anytime you want it to go and do this thing or that thing at these various camps, then you're going to see a lot of empty places. So there's so much more to say to this. We're gonna be almost kind of answering this question over and over again from different angles as we go through the rest of the roundtable, because it really is a foundational kind of question. It touches on player push, this idea of like bottlenecking and player migration, and like what causes players to move from one place to another throughout the game world naturally, and then how do you also incentivize that, where do players actually wanting to go most of the time. Itemization is a big part of that. In Pantheon, it will go beyond itemization and tie into like ability acquisition, certain types of faction gains. You're talking about the crafting and the perception systems as well, having their own, reasons and impetus to go here and go there. So there's lots of things governing player push and player migration, and camp size, camp type. That is another ingredient that plays into that. But there's lots of facets, and we'll hit on them a bunch as we go through.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well said. Okay, so we'll move on to encounter design and AI. There's a couple of questions here with that included, but we'll try to group two of them together. So, will encounter designs vary depending on composition of the opposing force? I know there's been some talk as to potentially varying it based on the size of the player force, but is there currently any thoughts on varying it based on level, class, pets, etc.? And will players ever be able to request harder or easier versions of mobs in some manner for lesser/greater rewards or bragging rights?
The first part is no. We're probably not going to go that route. The second part ties more into the infamy system, and I think it'd probably be better for Chris to jump in on this one.
Sure. Yeah. Incentivizing through the infamy system is a big part of that. Would probably be good to do like a roundtable on infamy, because I think that's still, we haven't said a lot about it. It's kind of a new concept in terms of the development timeline. And so it might be one of those things where we say, yeah, it's the infamy system, and people are like, what is that?
Yeah, that could be PvP too.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, on PvP servers, just make that point.
Yeah, very clear. Sorry.
Which is probably where you and I will be living, Kilsin. So I get where you're coming from. But yeah, so incentivizing. I'm just looking at the question here. players be able to request harder. So when we've talked about infamy, we've talked about obviously infamy in relation to guilds and more thinking of that higher end spectrum of the game and rating and raid tier bosses and things like that. And part of the infamy system is absolutely going to be bragging rights. The higher your infamy, that's going to tie directly into how capable of a guild you are and how far you've been able to push this ramping challenge of mobs of raid targets through infamy. And then as your infamy increases, you're going to be able to unlock perks that are going to play into your bragging rights, but then also some of the highest tier perks that we've discussed. In fact, Convo and I specifically talking through these things have been the ability as a guild to, once every so often, however often that would be, based if your infamy is high enough that you would actually, whether it be within something like a guild hall or something like that, have a choice of like a single raid target that you could spawn on demand on a pretty lengthy cooldown, obviously, as one of these perks that you unlock based on a high infamy level. So these are some of the things that we're kicking around. It falls very much into like the guild system and developing that out. And obviously it relates quite a bit to the infamy system as well, which would be good to talk through more thoroughly, more holistically, but definitely have those things in mind for sure.
Yeah, perfect, man. All right, so a couple more of these questions in the list from the same post are going to talk about other games and lessons and stuff. I might, for the sake of time, skip those. But there is another one here for encounter design. How will you ensure that the NPCs in the Merc feel like NPCs from the Merc rather than NPCs from Black Rose Keep, etc.? So how will we differentiate between the different zones and races and encounters and all that kind of shit that you experience?
I'll jump on this first, Chris. Well, a good example, I think, even now in Halnir, for instance, with the Ratkin, one of the things the Rat can do is they have the drawn sickness. It's unique to the Ratkin and Halnir Cave, and you were looking to do flavorful things like that within our dungeons and our world. Obviously, we're going to utilize and leverage the class abilities as much as possible because one, they're going to be tuned. The visual effects are already in. We're doing the animations, and so we're going to have to utilize that stuff. But we do want to layer in that extra flavor so things feel more unique on that front.
That's perfect. So we've got some zone design and zone population questions. So we're knocked down to... All right, so these are kind of like what ifs. So a zone isn't popular. So what are we going to do? So players just aren't using it. They're skipping over it. They tell you it's out of the way. It's too hard. It has poor risk versus reward, etc. It has bad loot. Or they just tell you it isn't working. So what's our response or your response as the designer to something like that? If you see a zone that just isn't getting the traffic and the flow, the population that it needs, how do we go about changing that?
Yeah, I think that would just, hopefully we never have a scenario that bad, but if we do, that would just warrant a design pass. We'd definitely have to get back in there and take all the feedback and really take a hard, honest look at the zone in general.
That's it. And hopefully this is what testing's for too. So this is what we need. Everybody listening right now, live, is a VIP. They have pre-alpha access. We've got PA5 coming up in the summer. And this is what we need you for. So we're going to have the PA5 testing phase is actually going to be pretty heavily funneled into what we need. So there will be grey boxing still. There's things that we don't need to put those pretty aesthetics and graphics in just yet. That comes later. But just to prepare everyone, we will be calling on you to help us, and we will need you to jump in and test in very designated testing sessions, so we can get the most out of it, get the feedback we need, the data we need, and then after that, we're going to be opening it up a little bit more kind of free roam. There's no kind of date on the free roam one, but just to let you guys know, I've been given a heads up from Mr. Ben Dean to give you some beans and let you know that we do with pre-alpha 5 coming in summer. The first couple of sessions will be very heavily kind of funneled into what we need, into a 1 or 2 hour session, whatever it may be. specifically designed to say, for example, there's a wall over there and lots of climbing objects. We need you all to go and climb and break the climbing system and climb as much as you can and funnel you all into that kind of area. And then, possibly something else and then something else after that until we get what we need. And then after those sessions are done and we get that kind of information, we can freely move on to a more open style PA so you can run around and enjoy yourselves a little bit more. So that's a little bean for you. But moving on from there, we've got a couple more encounter design and population questions.
I want to jump in here real quick,
Sure.
Kilsin, and hit that one again real quick because I think it's important to say there too, and this is a zone isn't popular, players aren't using it, skipping over it, it's out of the way. Pantheon's going to have very few like true flow zones, I guess, if you could think of it that way. And a flow zone is a zone that like has a very tight level range and sits really as a literal connector to another zone. So the zone A can take you up to level 10, and then zone B, this flow zone, goes from 10 to 15 purely only, and then it flows you into zone C, which is level 15 to 20, which goes into zone D, which is level 20 to 25. That's a very linear based zone design and progression path. Pantheon is not like that at all. And so often when we think of zones that don't see a lot of use, it's because to some extent players kind of just move through them in a linear fashion. And once you have moved through that content, since it's only level 10 to 15, from level 15 onward, there's very little reason, if any, to ever go back there. And so part of addressing that is in our actual world design fundamentals, which is, we've said probably from day one that, we've got this mixture of level ranges. The level spread in our zones has kind of cores, but then you're going to see, pretty wide swings and deviation from that cores and pockets within zones that are much lower level or much higher level. And with that comes all of the content. And it's a great opportunity to talk about something like the climbing system as well, which, that vertical aspect of the gameplay, I mean, I'm just predicting now, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be after Pantheon launches and there's been some acclimation to climbing, because it's just, even internally, there's still like this curve of like, oh yeah, like we can just climb and there's stuff up there to do. And so you think about, the zone that you start off in, or a zone, let's say a zone like Avendir's Pass, for example, where there's, you go through it and there's just stuff that you can see that you clearly, because of your climbing skill, you just can't get to it yet. Well, you can bet that once your climbing skill develops and you're able to come back to these areas and actually find out what's up there and do that, that's going to be a whole nother reason to want to come back to these zones. The same with Perception. We just put out the storyline video today, and it's a great example of why you would intentionally come back and revisit old zones to see like what may have changed and how have the things that you've done over the last 20 levels affected what kind of interactions you're going to have with the NPCs and things there. And we'll get into some of the other ideas is later with Convo can talk about some of the dynamic stuff we're planning too. But I think I really have high expectations for what we're going to achieve in response to specifically that concern right there.
Yeah, absolutely, and well said too. Like I was brushing over very quickly just to spill some beans about the PA5 being in summer, and just to calm some expectations that the first couple of sessions will be strictly focused testing on specific areas like climbing or something that we need to get tested. But that's not what the game's about. We will open it up after that to have a little bit more fun and free roam to run around and test quests and have fun with your friends and guildies and stuff. But we need to get that data first before we do it, and that's not what the entire game's about. Obviously, we're building a nice open-ended social game, but yeah, just want to kind of temper those expectations so nobody rages and flips tables on us when we release PA5 and say you can only go to that zone and jump on walls. So yeah, that might be that.
Yeah, it's preliminary. The goal of PA5 has been for forever, and after PA4 and as we've been pushing towards PA5, it really is about realizing that progression. But to do that, yeah, you're right. We're coming in with a lot of new systems, a lot of new gameplay, a lot of things that really need that focus testing. But it will be leading up to that later part of PA5 where it's time to really test the true progression of the game. What does it feel like to start and then go through all of this stuff organically and naturally? And that's going to be awesome.
Exactly. I can't wait. I know the rest of the team's itching to get in there as well.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. Yeah. So let's go. One last question on encounter design, then we'll move on. Will our actions fighting NPCs ever cause the area or NPCs around us to change? Some areas of other MMOs, have made it so if you kill the most powerful named of a species in an area, that area respawns as their rivals, etc. Do we have anything like that planned?
Not right now. We do have some dynamic content ideas, and I could see how they could play into this. But if we were to even pursue something like this, it would be more post-release.
Yeah, cool, man. All right. So let's move on. Nice, easy question here. Will we be able to share quests with group members?
Yes. Caveats. Basic quests in Pantheon. This is something that we need to do a better job of kind of getting this messaging a little bit more clear. There are basic quests, which internally I really almost always refer to them as tasks or jobs even. They are simply an NPC has a task for you to do, and you go and you complete that task. And they're going to be very, very faction related. Yes, there's going to be some rewards and some coin and some different things related to tasks, but it's going to be a primary way that you affect your faction with NPCs. So in Avendir's Pass, for example, there's a human village called Dimith, and you might do tasks or these basic quests for different villagers and individuals within Dimith to, in some cases, increase your faction standing with Dimith as a whole, or maybe with certain individuals within Dimith. And that the more that your faction with that specific group or individual or town or whatever it may be, city, grows, then you could see yourself gaining access to different vendors. There may be locked houses or locked doors to houses and other different type structures that through this faction you could gain access to. But that's really going to be a primary focus in our task and basic quest system is that kind of interaction with NPCs and with the faction system to make, just as part of making faction a very consistent, active part of the game. But storylines is a completely different aspect of the game. It's the perception system specific kind of questing, if you will. But we're calling them storylines on purpose because we're wanting to further differentiate those from these tasks. And with storylines, you're not going to be able to share storylines with other players. They're way too deep. They're way too sophisticated and layered, and there's so much flagging involved that it would just be incomprehensible to do something like that. And yeah, but with the task side of things, you will be able to share tasks that you found with other players, as long as you are on if it's like a one-step task and there's no prerequisites involved, then yes, you could share that. But if there are prerequisites, or it perhaps is a multi-stage kind of thing, and you're past the first part of it, then there's a chance that you might not be able to share those tasks with other players, kind of on a case-by-case basis, in the sense that it just kind of depends. We could go the route of, well, and what we'll probably do, I guess, if I had to say, like, right now, here's what we're going to do, it would be, you could share multi-step tasks with other players, and it would just kind of put them at the beginning of that step. So I would make a distinction between tasks that have prerequisites in order to get them at all. Like, you've had to have done this, this, and this before you can even get this task, regardless of how many steps it is, versus a task that is multi-step but has no prerequisites. And in that case, you could share that task with another player, and they would just get the step one of the task. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll stop now so we don't waste time.
Yeah, cool, man. Thank you very much. That's a good explanation. All right, so moving on, NPC AI / factions. Is it possible we may see NPCs on opposing factions in combat with each other? That brings back a massive memory from Vanguard 2. I remember out in the swamps, we had like the Gorglocks used to war in the middle every now and then. There was a scripted time they'd randomly come in, and if they got within range of each other, they'd start fighting. And it was, you needed, there were certain quests that you needed some rare items from them. So that made it very easy. If you were just on level or slightly under, and you were lucky enough to come across a faction war, if you were careful enough, you could get in and loot some of the stuff you needed and get out without having to fight or form groups and that. And that was, I think, a cool little experience that added to the whole thing. And then you could come back later on when I was like a powerful psionicist and just AE the entire zone down, which was also very satisfying. Will we have anything like that? Opposing factions, wars, anything like that with AI?
Yeah, I think we'll look to do stuff like that in certain situations, especially if we're trying to tell a story.
That's awesome, man. Definitely look forward to stuff like that. All right, so moving on to another question set. So camping has always been an area of strong debate within the community. While many players agree that loitering in an area of a zone or a dungeon for a while is great for socialization, many players also agree that allowing players to stay in a single area for too long can drive toxic player behavior and lead to players purposefully locking each other out of content. How are we looking at handling spawn so that players are encouraged to move on after a bit instead of camp a single spot for long periods of time? There is more to that question, but I'll let you guys just answer from there.
Yeah, that's another biggie. That is a biggie, and there's so many ways to go about responding to that. But we'll keep it simple and just kind of refreshing the conversation with Convo a little bit in preparation for tonight. Going back to the green server, one of the things that I had always wanted to do that I never did when I had the chance first time around was get a full set of Rubikit armor or Rubicite armor, however you pronounce it. And so I determined myself to do that this time around, no matter what it took. And partly for research purposes as well, because there's nothing quite like sitting at a Ruby BP camp for 24 plus hours and over a weekend and just about dying because you have to just sit there for that long, stay awake for that long. And so it brought me very, very back to very, very close proximity to what that feels like. And then asking questions like, is this fun? Is this really fun? So I think for me, the hardest thing about that question is when you're the person sitting there for that, you don't want to leave. You don't want to move. You know, if the person asking that question was the person sitting there at the camp with the spot and you kill the thing and it doesn't drop what you want, do you want to go for someone else to have a turn? And I mean, of course not. You know, most of the time you've waited for a long time to do that, and you want to stay there until it's done. So in thinking about it, you look at something like the Ruby BP or the Guy's Deceiver or, Mana Stone or some of those kinds of items, and they're insanely iconic. And understandably, because there was only one thing like it in the entire game. And not only were they like ultra unique, but they were ultra powerful, ultra important items in many senses. And so it's a decision that has to be made by kind of threading that needle in saying how ultra iconic and like isolatingly unique and important do we want to make our individual items to whatever percentage of items would be like that, versus what if there were multiple Ruby BP type items, or instead of being one, what if there were 4 or 5 different versions of that? Maybe they weren't all BPs, but they all provided some of that worn, I'm getting real granular now, detail, but like there's a way we can spread that itemization out a little bit, lessen some of that like insane iconic identity of an item for the sake of lessening that kind of entrenchment that can happen with camps where you have someone sitting on it for 24, 36, 48 hours, which is crazy. It's yeah.
But there's a social dynamic to that too. Like if I come up and I want to go and someone's locked it down for 2 straight days, like I can either ask to join their group and have that social encounter, or it can annoy me enough to make me want to steal the camp off them. Like they don't own that property or those NPCs. It's more of a it's a social kind of ruling system. They self kind of police. So that's where issues can come up that can be resolved by the community, and where we would like to step back a little bit and let these guys sort that out themselves. When's enough? When is enough? Like when do you give it up for somebody else to have a go? Do you let them join you? Do you try to block them? Do you try to take that off them? Like all these things I think are pretty well left to play out themselves, unless some serious issues start to arrive from those encounters.
Did you say try to take it off them?
Yeah, basically. If you come in as an enchanter and start mezzing stuff and wanting to take some of those mobs and freeze them before they can attack them, and then take one yourself, like that's all strategy. It's still social, but
Sure. Well, that brings up a really. Oh, sorry.
Have someone like Roanoke there, and you could just wait for him to die, and then you just kill the mob.
Well, that too. You get people that can't hold the camp
You're really
properly.
Fortunate when you find Roanoke camping the mob that you want. Just kidding, David. But you bring up a great point in the sense that that's not something. So that particular thing you just said there, that's not something that we would want to see. I don't think. Like everything up until, so again, to go back to that Ruby BP example, if I'm camping AOF for 48 hours, and then somebody runs in and steals it, like that's not a good day. That's not a good day. Now, granted, is there like, what do we do about that? How do we handle something like that? That's part of this whole like question of play nice, open world, not instanced, most damage done, like this whole conversation. And we're doing something with Pantheon that hasn't been done in a long time. We're creating an open world game where there's this kind of shared environment dynamics, and I am not going to say that we can definitively say what side of that spectrum we're going to fall on quite yet. We know the things we're committed to. We know we're committed to open world. We know we're committed to shared environments, shared experiences. We know we're committed to competition over resources. But just like, the decision with raiding, where, we're going to be having not like a most damage done approach to raiding, but more of a first to engage approach to raiding. That is specifically because there are just way too many situations and consequences and negative outcomes that come from not, lightly managing that situation as opposed to just leaving it completely open free-for-all. But that's also why we've maintained this most damage done paradigm on anything outside of raid encounters, because we really highly value that player-led kind of community, and the experience that comes in playing an MMO like that. So we'll like camp stealing, like blatant kind of over the top. This person's clearly here, they're clearly holding this, and I'm just coming in and completely like taking from it on a PvP server. Absolutely. Because you have a way to deal with that.
Yeah, exactly.
But on a PvE server, I don't think that's going to fly. I think there needs to be, to keep a semblance of enjoyable kind of honorary approach to other players. I think there needs to, I really do think there needs to be a semblance of an understanding of how a camp is defined, and to the degree to which we're going to push that, the degree to which we're going to clamp down on that, we're gonna have to just kind of take our philosophies, take the places where we are really, really, really firm, and then figure out what our wiggle room is within that context, and then do what ultimately is going to be best and healthiest for the game long term.
Yeah, and look, we can control that to a degree from loot. People camp an area because of a high valued item or loot, so we can spread that around or put it on several NPCs, to spread that kind of camp around.
Well, that goes back to what I was saying initially, is that you get those kind of crazy situations in some of those early games like EQ because there was only one place and one item like that, and so one way to kind of soften this situation a little bit is to you kind of take away a little bit of the item's iconicness by creating counterparts and equivalents, and place them in different places. But it does a lot to keep that kind of, crazy buildup in that one place. And then also the entire crafting sphere is another perfect example of how to offload some of that, where instead of camping this one item, maybe an equivalent item is found, or a couple of equivalent items are found in the crafting sphere. And it's more about, harvesting those extremely rare resources from that can be found in multiple different locations, tapping that into the climbing system, and not all being adventuring and combat related as a gate mechanic for players, but there's going to be lots of very, very rare resources and materials that you can only harvest at like some of the highest elevation points in the game, that require not only like a mastery of climbing, but also very important climbing gear on top of that to enable you to get to those kinds of heights, to be able to find those things. So it's having multiple avenues to achieve those kind of most powerful, most sought after items.
Yeah, and look, and again, like even as the doctor brings up and a few other people, we can tweak drop rate, and obviously put systems and checks in place that if you've had it drop once, then the next drop for you or for that particular character can be like drop in percentage like quite dramatically. So, to try to take that, that desire to want to camp for long periods of time. If you get one in 3 days, then the next one may take 3 weeks. So the desire to want to hang around and lock that camp down for the second one is going to be less and less. There's lots of different ways we can kind of look at it for PvE kind of servers. But again, it's all social. Like, I think to a degree we need to leave it for player policing and just kind of put the systems in place to keep it as fair as possible while still, not taking away from experiences like that. But it's going to be tough, and that's what you guys get paid the big bucks for, so I'm glad I don't have to make those decisions. All right, so let's move on. We're about halfway through, and we've got about 15-ish minutes. We may be able to run slightly over today because there's so many, but up to you guys. How often should we expect to see dynamic NPC spawns and zone populations that may be different based on certain conditions? Example. undead spawning at nighttime in place of other monsters, or maybe a zone population with NPC factions that are at war with each other, and sometimes one side or another side is in control.
So I love these questions, and just kind of going back to the dynamic content that we were talking about earlier. It's just really early to focus on it, but we definitely have some high level designs for things like night spawns and all, and can't wait to see stuff like that in our game. I think it's going to make a real difference.
Convo's being very, very modest here because he's got some really incredible ideas and designs and plans for a lot of that dynamic content, especially when it comes to like time of day stuff. And it's going to be really, really cool stuff. Really fun. Excited when he hopefully can talk directly about some of that stuff. It's going to be really good.
Yeah, and I'll just say what I love about the flexibility in something like dynamic content is you just think about some of the questions about areas of the world that aren't being utilized anymore, or for whatever reason we can go in, take a look at them, and utilize dynamic content to make those areas interesting for a time. I love nostalgia, especially for old zones, so I like to go back and see them as they were, but I think it's cool to leverage dynamic content to maybe change them for a little bit. And have some fun, and then ultimately let them revert back so we can all enjoy our nostalgia.
Yeah, awesome. Good stuff, guys. All right, so let's go to the next question, encounter design. The state system was hinted at in the Shaman abilities stream earlier in the year. Are there any plans to have NPCs take advantage of these state interactions against PCs? Are there plans for environments to trigger states, which could then be taken advantage of by PCs, player characters, or non-player characters? And how impactful are we hoping that the state system will be in encounters?
For the sake of time, simplest answer is yes. NPCs will have ways to cause states on players, and will also have different means to take advantage of those states, and environments will do that as well. When Convo and I were talking before the roundtable, we were talking through the wind shear climate and how you can expect to find yourself in a wind-swept state, like the one we talked about on the Shaman stream, at different times while in a wind shear climate, as well as the NPCs that happen to be there with you. And so, and you as players and NPCs will both also have ways to take advantage of that when it happens against one another. So yeah, it's again, very, very exciting part of the combat system to see, that evolve, and being able to see it with players and with NPCs both is going to make for some pretty exciting, pretty tense, pretty interesting encounters for sure.
Yeah, perfect. All right, let's move along, try and get through a few of these other ones. So, crafting. I don't know how much we can speak about this, but where is crafting in development? Since we know Corey was part of the team, he played a big part in crafting. He was very vocal. I had him on the Dev Roundtable a couple of times. And since he was our crafting guru, is it now in the hands of numerous developers? Is there anyone else on the team for which crafting is a passion, or is merely being implemented as a promised feature? Will it be in PA5? And can we give anything else away for crafting?
Great question. Corey was amazing and did a lot of amazing work on the crafting system. And, we have everything that he put together, and, and he didn't put it together in a silo. It was, there was like a lot of our designs and our systems, there's a lot of collaboration going on. And so these are things that we're all very aware of, those plans. And like with any system, it goes through phases of design and conception, and then that kind of sanity checking and iteration and planning in terms of, okay, what does it look like to actually implement this? Can we implement this exactly as we've concepted. And so I would say that where crafting sits right now is, no, it does not have a dedicated designer right now that like Corey was. But it is a very robust and relatively thoroughly designed group of systems that now are awaiting to go through that more deep kind of implementation pass. And it's one of the, again, in development, like certain things, you have plans for certain things to move in a certain sequence. And then as, reality moves along and things change, you have to rework that sequence. Doesn't mean that something necessarily gets cut, which, I mean, obviously crafting is not being cut, but certain things have to get cut along the way and in game development to account for that. But crafting is a fundamental part of Pantheon, and we understand how big and how deep the desire and the expectations for crafting go. And it's a system that we want to make sure gets the attention and has the quality that it deserves. And was just talking to Kyle Olson, our lead programmer, the other day, and crafting came up, and I just up until then had just not had a conversation with him about crafting yet, because we've been pushing so hard on so many different things. But he actually brought it up and was like, "So, hey, by the way, what state is crafting in? I'm super passionate about crafting and really want to make sure that it's great." And was just curious, kind of what the thoughts were. And I was like, man, that's so amazing to hear. Because Convo and I had just had a conversation about it a few days before, because I can't remember, Convo, what was the there was I think a content creator who did a stream. I can't remember if it was Basgrim or if it was Minus. Do you remember?
It was Minus.
Okay, so yeah, it was a Pantheon Plus thing about crafting, and I haven't had a chance to watch that yet, but I think Convo did.
NFL, by the way, and NFL did a great job. Yeah, he's really. I really enjoyed listening to that podcast. We listen to all these podcasts, so people. Hope you guys know that we appreciate all the work you guys put into your shows and all, and we find them interesting and awesome to listen to.
Oh, we do. Not just the whole team. Like, I don't even have to pass links on to some of the fan sites and those videos and shows and streams. Like, the team's already all over it. They link me before I can link them. It's amazing. You guys do a fantastic job.
Well, I do need to watch that one, and Convo said the same thing, so I will. But it really stirred him to kind of come to me and say, hey, we really need to kind of keep the fire burning here on crafting. And we had a great discussion about it. And then it was literally the next day, or maybe 2 days after that, I had that conversation with Kyle. And it's just it was very encouraging to me to know that, like, that fire is still burning, and the very, passionate and capable people that we have on this team have a fire to really see it through. And honestly, like with most things, I'm constantly amazed at what this team can do, because we just as a team have a way of pushing things further and doing things more well than I think we think is possible, when it starts off. And that's just my hat's off to all of these people at on this team making this game. I mean, it's just incredible. And so crafting is in good hands. We see it, we feel it, we know how deep and important it is. We want, and it will have all the same care and love and attention that Perception and adventuring and everything else does.
Absolutely.
So rest assured.
Yeah, there's lots of us that love crafting, lots of us that love PvP, lots of us that love other systems. Like, we're all gamers like you guys, so nothing's going to be left out or half done. But yeah, some things, like with all games in development, need to be kind of pushed aside and set back and changed and moved around until we get it to a standard that we are in love with and can release with. But yeah, it's not being removed or changed. All right, so let's move on. We haven't got long left. We'll try to get as many done as we can to finish up. So the rest, there's a couple of repeated questions. So we might just skip a few and get as many new ones done as possible and then have a Q&A at the end. If you guys are cool with that.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. Will the enemy dispositions be displayed next to their names in live, or will it be seen when you /con an enemy?
Well, I think to start off for testing purposes, we'll probably just display it in the name, just being in that testing environment. But long term, there's definitely some internal UI discussions that we're having, just trying to find the most appropriate placement for it.
Perfect. Actually, that's a really good short answer. We might try to quick fire these last ones and get through as many as we can. Will players have the ability to make campfires anywhere in the game to cook?
No. I can only imagine what that would look like if they have access to too many campfires at once.
You imagine that, like RuneScape, people just lighting lines of fires and fires and fires. All right, so what classes will be in testing? Pretty much everything we've displayed, correct? There's no new ones releasing for testing, is there?
I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah, so I couldn't find my push to talk button. We're not going to say anything about what classes are going to be in PA5 just yet. That's something that we're going to communicate to our testers directly here soon, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay, cool. Special systems, early on, part of the vision Brad described included a caravan system as well as a mentor system. We heard those systems touched on over the years during live streams, but it's been quite some time since we heard any mention of them. Are those systems still planned for release? And if so, can you provide any details on where they are currently in development?
No, they're not planned for release.
Moving on to, doesn't mean they're not going to be put in either, just as a caveat, guys. Like,
correct. Right. Yeah, they're just not planned for release. Doesn't mean we're gonna skip them or anything.
Exactly. A caravan system, can be added later on. It's not going to be the end of the world. My question is in regards to AI proximity aggro. Any sort of design we can expect to see at launch. Whether that be a slow fade into the mob's health bar name tag the closer the player gets to the mob, or something different to give players a small way to help inform them whether they are too close to a mob or not. So distance, ratio, proximity, aggro. Is there any way the players are going to be able to see that? Is that going to be a skill? Is there going to be any kind of UI information to show that?
Trial and error.
I love that. Best way. Will the world be populated with small hidden chests and or stashes for players to discover on their journeys to add an extra reward for exploration? Perhaps a chest hidden in a fallen tree trunk and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. We love this stuff. I think it just helps keep you on your toes when you're exploring and adds that extra level of excitement.
Exactly. What is the team's design philosophy towards areas players might be able to reach that AI can't reach, particularly dungeon content, where doing this could trivialize bits of dungeon content? I think they mean flying over a zone, or in this case climbing over something to skip a boss, or to skip mobs to get to a boss. What's our philosophy towards that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, skipping mobs to get to a boss is no problem. Using the game mechanics to explore your options, and that's fine. We've talked about this with climbing, because climbing obviously brings a lot of potential for things to go weird when you're able to all of a sudden access the vertical plane. But and we've just talked about this a lot. Part of the way we're addressing that is just in the same way that climbing has caused us to think very differently about the world and the way the world is built, and how encounters and areas and everything are designed. It really does the same thing for NPCs, in the sense that in a world, in a game where players can climb, then number one, you're going to have NPCs that are going to be able to climb. Number two, if they can't climb, then they're going to have ways to deal with people who are climbing. And so we've used a few examples of that, a spider spitting venom, or obviously humanoid NPCs often having, thrown weapons or ranged weapons, and magic classes being able to shoot fireballs at players on the wall. And then hand in hand with that is when you are in a climbing state, you are going to be in a more vulnerable state than you would be otherwise. And so that, I think, is going to do a lot to make the decision to get on a wall more difficult, or at least not difficult, but it's not going to just be the first thing that you do, because you have to weigh the risk and the reward.
Yeah.
And then if we're also not in some cases, because I'm seeing, like, I was counting on some people to throw in the edge cases, like, okay, well, when I'm seeing Vander post here, like, so what is a bear going to, like, spit venom or pull out a bow? At the end of the day, I'm totally okay with mobs lerping to where you're at. If you're going to get on a wall and climb up to get out of the way of a bear, then that bear is just going to lerp to where you're at, not on a wall. But it's going to, if you do climb up out of that state, then it could. But the other thing to remember is that we've got some interesting ways of working some of the things out. So I'll take your bear example and say, okay, a bear can't spit venom, a bear can't shoot a bow, a bear can't throw rocks, but it's a fantasy game. A bear could ram into the wall and knock you down. A bear could, slam into a wall and knock some debris loose and shake you off your hold.
Yeah, give a deafening roar to make you lose your grip, or, rocks.
There are so many ways when you sit and you think, and that's why designers are underrated, because it's that mental work of sitting and thinking, okay, how do we create believable logic that flows through all these things, and really, if a warrior can use battering ram to break through environments, I mean, how strong is a thunderpaw? I mean, it's like, you need to be careful if you get one of those things after you. And who's to say that you don't make matters worse for yourself, because thunderpaws can not only slam into the wall and knock you down, but you're going to put a thunderpaw into an enraged state if you get somewhere where it can't immediately get to you. So it's trying to hurt you, it can't get to you, you're going to make it angry, and then it's going to start slamming into this wall to where when you do fall off and you have to face it, now you're in a much worse situation than you were to begin with. So again, thinking about Pantheon as a climbing game, we're thinking about all of its NPCs, all of the denizens within Pantheon, being able to deal with you when you are on a wall.
Yeah, perfect, man. All right, so this is a triple question that I'm going to consolidate down to one sentence just for time, because we are running over, about AI. So there's three kinds of AI: scripted random AI, and true AI. The question is, are there plans or ideas to implement the true AI for at least some NPCs, like raid bosses or town guards, merchants, etc.?
You going to take that one, Convo?
Well, we did take a look at this, and it's pretty complex, and I just don't think we're going to dive that deep into it. And they even ended in note that no MMORPG has ever implemented true AI, which I get, but it's definitely not something we would dive into right now for sure.
Yeah, cool. All right, so will certain dispositions make enemies more fragile and easy to defeat, like the Dallas Cowboys, and others stronger and much harder to defeat, like the Philadelphia Eagles? This is specifically for Convo.
That's the Al Bundy disposition, where there's certain people living 20 years in the past, still celebrating their victories. So I guess that would be the name for that.
All right, so We're going to skip past and go to... Will Pantheons support the ability to summon multiple permanent/charmed pets? If not, will it be planned post-release?
Pets, yes.
Cool.
We already have that plan for summoners. Charmed, not at launch, not at release, but that is a potential viable path for the charm ability, the charm concept to grow and evolve down the line.
Awesome. And will there be pet commands?
Yes.
And will necromancers require corpses for their pets to summon undead?
We'll have to wait and see.
Good answer. Has VR considered hidden stats and latent abilities in gear? Like additional stats and or latent abilities not in the description of the item?
Not specifically in not being in the description. There will be worn effects, effects that apply to you when you equip certain items. Obviously, ways to... we don't even want to get into the whole itemization thing because I'll go too long on that. But the plan right now is for those things to be exposed. Yeah. Okay,
cool. Last two questions before we do a quick Q&A. These are added on after the fact, so you guys might not have seen them, but they're pretty simple. AI, threat management, in MMOs can often be stale, with most enemy actions aside from AoEs being directed solely towards the player with the highest amount of threat. Can we expect to see more interesting enemy tactics, such as attempting to target or counter what specific players may be doing, regardless of their current threat level? So if a healer or, say, a caster is trying to cast a block spell or something, can the AI detect that and try to target that NPC to stop them before they cast or hit them with something, etc.?
Yeah, I think for sure there's things like that we'll be able to get in. We talk about it. We've already had discussions, and then also leveraging some of the dispositions as well. And I'm sure Chris can speak more on it as well.
Yeah, you saw a little bit of that in the Tower of the Reckless Magician stream, where the certain classes were being targeted and focused by the NPCs. And you're gonna see a lot more of that kind of stuff. And just like Convo was saying, it's gonna be a lot of fun to roll some of that into the dispositions, where you have like he said earlier, like a healer hater, or like a wizard slayer kind of disposition, where it's not just that certain NPCs are sniffing for healing spells and trying to counter those whenever they happen, but you've got dispositions that actually like kind of put in these particular dispositions completely on like the just relentless warpath against wizards, and they're immune to taunt, and you just can't do anything about it except kill them. I mean, you just think like the Terminator, after your wizard, and you just have to figure out how to put it down. Seeing things like that in dispositions, especially when you're not expecting it, is again all part of that refreshing kind of dynamic zone NPC encounter design that dispositions are gonna create for us.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much, guys. All right, so that's the end of the question list. We're going to go into an open Q&A now. Q&A with you guys. So if you have anything that wasn't answered, or you want us to touch very briefly on something that was already discussed, and you don't want to wait for the forums to throw it down there, put it in here and tag myself, please, so I can see it, and I'll read it out to the guys. We'll probably do this for about 10-15 minutes, if that's all right with you guys.
Yeah, sure.
Yep, let's do it.
Perfect. All right. So hit us with any questions, tagging myself, guys, and we'll get to them. Can we get any info on how the rogue rope will differ from current climbing, and how that will play out for the class? So what kind of advantages will a rogue in the group with a rope be over normal players?
Well, I think, you're going to see the rogue having some kind of natural inclination and some natural advantages when it comes to climbing. So that's part of the equation, because rogues are going to be able to, naturally speaking, be more predisposed to reaching certain places that other classes can't at that point in time. Climbing is a very... I'm trying to think in real time like how deep I want to go into this, because we've talked a lot about climbing, we've shown climbing, but we haven't really gotten deep into like, I guess you specifically, like, how do you get better at climbing? Because if climbing just gets better when you do it, then you're going to max out climbing way too fast, right? Like, you're just going to be able to get on a wall, and you might just say, I'm going to take the whole day today and just climb up and down this one spot until I'm maxed. And that doesn't work. So I mean, where I lean to right now, and understand this is one of a few different paths we could take. But it's possible that, for example, you might only be able to improve your climbing skill by, let's say, like 5 points a day. And once you've reached that 5 points for that day, then that's it. And that in and of itself, if the skill of climbing alone is based on like a 250 point skill, where you start at 1 when you get the climbing skill and you can reach 250, then you're talking about, a good chunk of time before anybody is able to fully max out their climbing skill from climbing alone. But that doesn't include things like racial bonuses or class-based bonuses that, like, for example, the rogue would have, and then all the whole like climbing gear side of it as well, either through like specific pieces of gear that you would actually fully equip in a slot, or climbing enhancements or attachments that you can add. So like spiked soles or something like that to put on your that you can attach to any foot piece of gear, like any boot, any sandal, anything like that. So we're working on making sure that climbing is something that is really going to take investment of time and is woven into the itemization. But back to the point, a rogue is going to have some advantages on that front. They may have, for example, they might be able to improve their skill by 6 points per day or 8 points per day, something like that, to get them further along more quickly. Or they might just start out the whole thing with like 10 points in climbing already, and so they just kind of stay naturally ahead. But utilizing that, the length of rope is going to allow a rogue to take that advantage that they have and then extend that to their group. And the rogue rope is going to be a channeled ability. It's going to be, I guess you would refer to as like an indefinite channeled, where once you get into the length of rope state, you're going to drop it down. It's fun to talk about this because it's something that Kyle's kind of right on it's fun to, it's fun. But you're going to get into that kind of state where you've lowered the rope. It's a length of rope. And while you channel that, you can channel it indefinitely, because you might have 6 people that need to climb up it. Then they can climb. And it's kind of, it's not like an infinite length. You can't stand at like 200 meters off the ground and just drop this thing all the way down, but it will be improvable. So the length of rope is not static. It'll actually get better, and that's going to be fun to see eventually. But yeah, nice. While you channel it, people can climb it. And if you take damage though, then your group's going to fall.
The rope should snap.
If you stop channeling the ability, the people on the rope are going to fall. So
it's like the new evac for wizards. Yeah. Just drop people instead.
So trust your rogues.
Be nice to your rogues. I love being a rogue right now. All right, let's move on to a few quick fire questions. Do you plan to avoid players hanging out in their guild halls, which in other games led to empty feeling in towns? We don't really have guild halls, so that's not going to be a problem for us.
Well, we don't have them now. But
no, not yet.
We might have them then. And that's something we need to get to a point where we can do more of like a full, kind of treatment, and maybe a dev roundtable. I mean, eventually a stream, just guilds and like the guild functionality, and then guild plan.
Yeah, perfect. Are corpses and dragging coming back?
they've never left.
We had them in testing. I think it broke at one stage. I think that may be why the question was asked.
Oh yeah, the bugs will be fixed. But yeah, there will still be corpses that you leave, and yes, you will still be able to drag your corpses if you are able to get in range.
Awesome. How will you balance challenge with players having different masteries within a role? That's a pretty in-depth question, but can we say anything on that quickly, or have we already covered it?
Balance challenge with players having different masteries within a role. You know, I think the most candid and simple answer to that is I don't see that as a balanced. I don't see that as something that needs to be balanced. I think there's a level of imbalance, maybe like dirtiness is kind of a weird word, but it works in the sense that like. If everything's too sterile and too surgically balanced, then you don't have those meaningful distinctions. And I think there's if you have different mastery than this person and you both come to the same fight, it's okay that one struggles more than the other, because there's going to be situations where the inverse happens. So I would just leave it at that.
Yeah, cool. Very quickly, will there be size-restricted dungeons / paths that only short races can get into, and bigger races will need to be shrunk?
I think we hope to have some entries and stuff like that. We've talked about that kind of stuff for a while. I just think it's fun and cool.
Yeah, sweet. Will there be climbable walls that will require skill beyond the current cap? Like special epic or mythic walls, or extra challenging walls that only the best of the best.
Oh, for sure. Well, yeah. I mean, there's not only height, there's surface. Nice. You can have a really short, wall that's icy, and you can't climb it because you're not able to climb that surface yet. And you might have a skill level that isn't quite there, but you've got an attachment to your gloves or a special pair of gloves that allow you to be able to hold on and get up. Nice. But yes, I mean that's the whole point. Like you've got to build in those areas in the game that you see, and you just can't get there yet, and you just can't wait until you can. And that's a huge part of it. Not just and having things outside of even the scope of like a section of content, meaning like even at launch, like to launch with places that are too high to be able to truly ever get to the top of yet for anyone is awesome. It's awesome. So yeah, you can bet that for sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, guys, we might wrap it up. We've gone about 20 minutes over, but well worth it for that kind of information.
I did see that Vandred had a question that he dropped in. There were 3, and I'm pretty sure Chris and I spoke on them, so I don't mind jumping in and touching on them.
I think I skipped over them for time, but I'll go back. So
yeah, we could hit maybe at least one of them. I think they were good questions.
So MMOs out there.
They were all good questions. Let me rephrase that. We're not skipping anyone because they're not bad questions.
No. Honestly, I knew the
pitchforks out.
Yeah, I knew because of the amount of time and the amount of in-depth questions and how much we were covering that we would have to do this. But it wasn't personal to any one person. It's literally just we've touched on it with a few other things, so I skipped based on that. In every MMO out there, every NPC, regardless of class, always ends up fighting in melee range. We've seen this in Pantheon already, where a mage NPC makes some attempt to cast a few spells and then just runs into melee range, only to die because it has bad HP, AC, mitigation, etc. Will you design the NPC AI to behave more in line with its class? So will a mage like fire, drop bombs, and then when it runs out of mana start running around like a screaming chicken, or will it actually just run into suicide on you?
You're going to see wizards, for example, doing what wizard player classes will do. If a wizard NPC runs out of mana, they're going to switch to their magic line to build that mana back up so that they can keep going. So that is when we're ready to really showcase that, we're going to showcase that really heavily because that's a very important piece. We'll have streams devoted to that. And it's something that will continue to improve and improve and improve. So yes, you can definitely count on that. And no, don't take what you may have seen in streams or experienced in testing before as an indicator of how far and how deep that's going to go.
Perfect. Static NPCs. So nearly all games zones are just filled with NPCs standing around, towns, dungeons, here and there, all just standing there doing nothing other than a guard assigned to actually patrol and guard a location. Are we looking at doing anything with our NPCs to wander around, make them more dynamic and realistic?
Yeah, I mean, we're utilizing the wander reasons now. I think that helps, even though it might be mindless for some of them. It still helps, brings a little more life. I think we'll see how far we can get where, everyone in the village or the town is moving around doing things. It's just a lot of time. But I think something that helps a lot as well, even with a static NPC, is just idle animations. If it's one thing to see a guy staring at a wall with a mining pick, it's another thing to actually see him using the animation and mining the wall. I think those things help a lot. So yeah, we'll do the best we can for sure.
Awesome, man. And last one, will NPCs of a given class have the full toolbox of skills, spells, and abilities available to player characters of the same class and level?
Yes.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear. All right, that's pretty much it, guys. I just want to wrap it up by saying thank you very much. I know you both are very, very busy. I know we've got a lot going on at the moment as a company with PA5 so close and everyone working so hard, plus with all this coronavirus restrictions and quarantines, everyone's knuckling down and working their bums off. So thank you very much for sparing some time for myself and the community.
Yeah, no problem, man. I feel like we're probably both going on quite a lot of hours straight here, so if we feel tired, to apologize. We're just working a lot.
Yeah. it's that like excited energy of it's crunch time on a lot of levels. I mean, we're kind of always in crunch time, but man, when you start drawing close to a PA, I mean, we've said it so many times, so many different ways. I don't know if it actually lands on everyone, but having players in the game is like, it's the best thing in the world. And so when we get close to that, when we have that in sight, it's like, yeah, the hours increase. Yeah, everything kind of gets a little bit crazy, but it's all with that, like, just can't wait to get there, get us there as fast as we can, because that moment is just, it's what it's all about. It's what it's all about. None of us would do this if it was just us making something to jump in ourselves and run around. And it's the fact that there are going to be so many people coming in and just pouring themselves into and investing themselves into this game. That is what makes every second of this 100% worth it. And so can't wait to get there. We're close. We're close. Super duper close.
Yeah, well said, man.
Yeah, man. Exactly. Well said.
A lot of passion and hard work going into this. We all can't wait to play it, just like you guys. So on that note, thank you very much to Chris Joppa Perkins and Tim Convo Wathen. We will be back next month with potentially a couple of new devs, new topic. We'll see where we're at. We got PA5 coming in summer, which is North American summer, just to clarify. So within the next few months, no set date or time yet, but it is coming. It is very close. So we just want to let you know it is summer, so you've got a rough time frame. And yeah, we'll leave it there. But thank you very much, guys. I will, as usual, post this in the VIP and champion sections straight away, and I'll put it up on YouTube so you guys can have a look if you missed it live, and then a week from now we'll release it to everybody. So you guys get that 1 week exclusive. Other than that, thank you very much, guys. Did you want to say anything, Tim?
No, I just want to thank everyone. Have a great night.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Yeah, same.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. Have a great night. We'll talk to you next time.